I can still remember that day, even though it was nearly 10 years ago, in my most recent ministry in Oklahoma. And I remember it wasn't going very well that day. It was kind of a bad day. I felt like nothing was being accomplished. I was just moving from one interruption to another, which, by the way, kind of a side light here. Often that's exactly what God wants to have happen, and we just don't see it. And I don't think I was seeing it very well. It was after 5 p.m. I was in the office. Everyone else was gone. I was trying to get out the door to attend a meeting that I didn't really want to go to. I remember it was a cold and windy evening, so I just put on my heavy coat and gloves, and I was turning out the last light when my phone rang. And as I answered it, someone knocked on my outside office window. Now, what's interesting about that is that window was at least 6 feet off the ground. How did they even know I was in there? What are the odds, I thought to myself. It's all happening at once, just like it has the rest of this day. I looked through the window and I recognized him. He had been by for help before. His family was often with him in the truck. He launched into his lengthy story while I still had the other person in my other ear on the phone. Folks, what do we do? What should be given to the extremely needy? Now, I think I managed to do the right thing in that case. I think I kept my irritation hidden. I took him and his family over to the 7-Eleven next door and helped him out. But I'm sure there have been times when my response did not please the Lord. And so we need to look at this subject. And why not today, as we're working our way through the book of Acts, these first 10 verses, we're actually going to spend a couple of weeks on these 10 verses, and I'm just going to read them as I go. The first 3. One day, Peter and John were going up to the temple at the time of prayer. At 3 in the afternoon. Now a man who was lame from birth was being carried to the temple gate called Beautiful, where he was put every day to beg from those going into the temple courts. Verse 3, if I can find it. When he saw Peter and John about to enter, he asked them for money. What do we do with these situations, folks? There are extremely needy people all around us every day. Some are in our own families. Some are in our churches, in our work world, or just as we're moving through the community. And though many of them have deep physical needs, like this man that we've just been introduced to, all of them have deep spiritual needs. And it's so easy, especially because we see them so often. It is so easy to treat them as non-persons, as to just ignore them. So the question, what should be given to the extremely needy? Today we're just going to look at one answer there, and it has to do with us, because later on we're going to see how the Lord responds in those situations, and how the world responds, what the world gives. But first of all, what do we give? Well, I think what we give is at least what you see in verse 4. Peter looked straight at him, as did John. And then Peter said, "Look at us." Peter and John both looked straight at him. What does that indicate? This man was an eyesore. This man was an embarrassment. This man was an inconvenience. Maybe he was loud. Certainly persistent, because it says every day he was in that spot. What spot? The entrance. The entrance to worship. Peter and John were devout Jews. Yes, they were Christians, but they were devout Jews, already used to praying 3 times a day. 9 a.m., 3 p.m., sunset. Just like Daniel. You remember that story? They're going through the gate, it says. Not to the city of Jerusalem. They're already inside the city. They're at one of the temple gates. And this one is an especially ornate one called the Beautiful Gate. And it would have been the gate from the outer court where the Gentiles were allowed. As you approach the temple, the Gentiles were allowed in the outer court. It would be then the gate you would go through to be into the inner court, which was for Jews only. So this beggar had strategically planted himself, or had his friends do so for him. Because giving alms to beggars was a praiseworthy act of worship in the Jewish religion. And Peter and John, 2 good Jews, are on their way to worship. The beggar takes advantage of that situation. And he's like the busy traffic intersection beggars that we all see every day in our travels, carefully planting themselves. Well, if you didn't know this story, if you had no idea what Peter and John were like, you might think, well, here's what they did. They probably did just what we do. They averted their eyes. They quickened their pace. They pretended to be concentrating on something important. Quick, get your phone out. They hurried through the gate, avoiding the beggar. Well, you can imagine that that's what they did, but that's not what happened. We just read what they did. They looked straight at him. And they also told him, "Look at us," which he did, with expectation of some material benefit that he was going to receive from them. But as Peter explains later on in verse 6, we don't have much to give you materially. And they didn't. But what he does give them is respect. He looked at him. He didn't just ignore him. Remember the old television show Dragnet? The star, Joe Friday. Sergeant Joe Friday. Not much to look at, was he? He was a great detective. A very no-nonsense type cop. I remember my friend John Stedman used to say that Joe Friday had the personality of a lead pencil. In one particular episode, there was a derelict. During that time, back in the 60s, I remember we kids, we just called them bums. Now the PC term, I guess, is a homeless person. Actually, that's not the latest PC term. If you've been out on the West Coast and listened, it's now unhoused or houseless. Whatever. Sergeant Friday and his sidekick Bill Gannon are interviewing this man, and in the course of the conversation, Friday calls him Sir, which is what typically he would do when he was interviewing any male witness. But that poor old man, several times after that interview, he would just say almost to himself, he called me sir. He called me sir. I'm just a beggar. I'm just a bum, a panhandler. That's what this man was in our story. We don't really know him by name. He's inside the temple of God. And his life was pretty boring, wasn't it? The same kind of humiliation day after day, year after year. You could probably say that he had long ago given up any shred of dignity. You could probably say that his self-esteem was completely shot. Now, in our worst moments, sometimes, we might be heard to whisper, "Oh, those kind of people don't deserve my respect." Aren't you glad that God never treated us that way? He did not give us what we deserved. In fact, that's a wonderful definition of mercy. Mercy is when you don't get what you deserve. It's actually kind of on the negative side. The consequences that you and I deserve. But God didn't treat us that way, did he? What if you were God? What if I was God? Would we give everyone what we think they deserve? I remember when I first became a 49er. No, I don't mean a gold prospector. I don't mean a football player. I don't even mean a fan of the San Francisco team. I mean April 2002, when I became 49 years old. 1 year less than 50. I can still remember that day. Better yet, I can remember the week or so that surrounded it, because I was in Wichita at the time singing with the lads, the quartet. Within a matter of 7 days of that 49th birthday, I did the following. I tried to get in the wrong pickup truck as I was leaving a golf course. My son was there to witness it and has never let me forget it. I put a pair of my friend's glasses in my sunglasses case, which was located in my briefcase, which was located in a trunk, and I still have absolutely no memory of doing any of that. And I lost the briefcase for 24 hours. And then the coup de grace. I parked a borrowed car in front of the church's main doors one evening after the revival. And I went inside to get the other 3 quartet members to drive us to dinner. We came out, we all piled into the car. I could not get the ignition key to work. I turned the wheel, I moved the gear shift, no results. I could not get that key into the lock even. And after about 30 seconds of struggling, I noticed a man standing outside my car door, looking through the window. I rolled it down. He was dangling a set of keys at face level. And he said, if you plan on taking my car, you'll need these keys. I thought I would at least make it to 50. I was just a 49er. I was already acting like an old fool. Good answer. I was only 49 and I already had AAADD, AAADD, age-activated attention deficit disorder. It seems like the older I get, the less I have to offer. You ever feel like that? If you know this story, you know that Peter felt like that. Basically, he ends up saying, I don't have much to offer you, but what I have, I give to you. It's true. There isn't much that we have to give. Most of us don't have large sums of money. Most of us are not gifted by God with the gift of healing. Most of us can't give answers to people's deep hurts. But you know what we all can give? Respect. We can give respect. We can call them sir or ma'am. We can look straight at them instead of away from them. You say, well, I always have said that respect has to be earned. And you know that is true. But you know, you can choose in a moment. You can choose to at least show someone respect even if they've not yet earned it. Let's stand together, and I just want you to take this challenge with you. You know, what should we give to the extremely needy? As you leave this service today, just try to do this one thing. Look straight at everyone who approaches you. Give them at least that amount of respect. And then see where that leads. And we'll come back to the story and see where it all led. But this is where it starts with each one of us. We're going to sing together about needs. I need thee. We all are very needy. We all are part of the extremely needy. That's why we're here today, trusting in Christ, trusting in the Lord. Let's sing that together, and if a decision for the Lord needs to be made, the offer's wide open. Let's sing.